Unfaithful wife wanted husband to pretend he was just uncle to his own children. CEO's ultimate revenge landed them both behind bars. It started with a seemingly innocent evening at home. I was scrolling through my phone, ignoring the usual buzz of notifications, when I caught sight of my wife's reflection in the window. She was perched at the dining table, face illuminated by the glow of her screen, fingers flying across the keyboard. Her expression was a mix of concentration and something I couldn't quite place. "Working late?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She jumped, startled, and her phone clattered onto the table. "Oh, yeah, just coordinating something for the PDA." Her laugh sounded a little too forced. I shrugged it off and went back to my feed. But that moment stuck with me. Something felt different. The next day, I caught a glimpse of her phone while she was in the kitchen. It buzzed with a message: "Can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet?" My stomach dropped. I couldn't tell if it was anger, disbelief, or heartbreak that hit first. I hadn't said anything, though. I wasn't sure I wanted to face what this could mean. But the message kept replaying in my mind. Who was this? Why was she talking to them? Could there be an explanation that didn't end with me shattered? I spent the next week battling myself. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe it was a joke, a miscommunication. But her behavior became harder to ignore. Turning her phone face down, smiling at messages that she'd quickly swipe away, late nights with vague excuses. One night, she fell asleep on the couch, her phone balanced precariously on the armrest. I shouldn't have, I know, but I picked it up, and there it was. The name Jake repeated over and over in her messages, his words more intimate than I could bear to read. I put the phone back and stared at her sleeping face. How could she look so peaceful while my world was crashing down? And yet I didn't say a word. Not then. I had to know more. Confronting her felt too final, too irreversible. So I started watching, waiting for cracks to reveal what lay underneath our seemingly perfect life. I couldn't get the name Jake out of my head. Who was he? A coworker? Someone from her book club? My thoughts spiraled as I replayed every interaction we'd had over the last few months, searching for signs I'd missed. The following Saturday, she told me she had a volunteer event at the community center. Normally, I wouldn't have thought twice about it, but now, every excuse felt like a lie. So, I did something I never imagined I'd do. I followed her. Sitting in my car across from the community center, I saw her walk in, dressed more carefully than I'd seen her in months. Red lipstick, heels she hadn't worn in years. But she wasn't alone. A man, tall, lean, with an easy confidence, met her at the door. They exchanged a hug that lasted a beat too long, then disappeared inside. I clenched the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. This wasn't just messaging. This wasn't in my head. I was watching the pieces of my marriage fall apart in real time. I waited for them to leave, heart pounding, fingers trembling as I clutched my phone. Should I take a picture? Call her? Storm inside? Every option felt impossible. So I just sat there, paralyzed, until they walked back out 2 hours later, laughing like old friends. Or something more. He opened the car door for her, and she touched his arm. A small gesture, but one so intimate it nearly broke me. As they drove off, I sat there in stunned silence, wondering how I'd missed the fact that I wasn't the only man in her life anymore. That night, when she came home, I tried to act normal. She smelled like vanilla and wine, her cheeks flushed. "How was the event?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, fine," she said, kicking off her heels. "Tiring, though. I think I'll head to bed early." I watched her go, torn between wanting to confront her and desperately needing more proof. Maybe, deep down, I was still hoping I'd find an explanation that didn't confirm what I already knew. Or maybe I wasn't ready to hear her say it out loud. The next morning, I couldn't pretend anymore. I needed answers. My wife left early for yoga, another recent addition to her routine, and I sat at the dining table, staring at her laptop. She rarely used it, but something told me to check. It wasn't locked. Her email was open. At first, there was nothing unusual. Spam, newsletters, the PDA updates. But then I found a folder named Projects. Inside were drafts of emails, never sent, each one more devastating than the last. "Jake, I don't know what we're doing, but I can't stop. When I'm with you, I feel alive in a way I haven't in years. I don't want to hurt him, but I also don't know how to let you go. Last night was perfect. I replay it over and over in my head. I hate myself for wanting more. I couldn't read further. My head spun as I slammed the laptop shut. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. It was real. It had depth. And worst of all, it wasn't over. When she came back from yoga, glowing and relaxed, I confronted her. "Who's Jake?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my best efforts. Her reaction told me everything. The color drained from her face, and she stammered. "What are you talking about?" "You know exactly what I'm talking about," I said, holding back tears. "I saw the emails. I saw you with him." She didn't deny it. Instead, she sat down, buried her face in her hands, and whispered, "I didn't want you to find out like this." "Find out what? That you're throwing away our life? Our marriage? For what? Some fantasy?" My voice rose, the words spilling out faster than I could control. She looked up, her eyes filled with tears. "It's not that simple." "Then explain it to me," I said, desperate. She took a deep breath and said, "Jake makes me feel seen, like I matter. We talk about everything, dreams, fears, stupid little things. I don't even know when it happened, but I couldn't stop it. I tried, but I couldn't." Her words cut deeper than I expected. "And me? I don't make you feel seen. It's not that, it's just, I don't know. Somewhere along the way, we lost something, and I found it with him." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. All the fights, the late nights, the lies, they weren't stress or coincidence. They were signs I'd ignored until it was too late. Her confession hung in the air like a storm cloud, heavy and electric. "So, what now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Do you want to be with him?" She hesitated, and the pause felt like a lifetime. "I don't know," she admitted. "I care about him, but this isn't who I am. I never meant for it to go this far." I let out a bitter laugh. "That's the thing about cheating. You don't trip and fall into someone else's arms by accident." She flinched at the word cheating, but I didn't care. I'd spent months questioning myself, wondering if I was losing my mind. Now that the truth was out, I wanted her to feel the weight of it. "Was it worth it?" I asked. "All the lies? The sneaking around?" "I never stopped loving you," she said quickly, as if that would somehow lessen the blow. "That's not love," I snapped. "That's selfishness." She started crying, and for a moment I almost reached out to comfort her. Old habits die hard, but I stopped myself. This wasn't about her pain. It was about the wreckage she'd left behind. "You need to decide," I said, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. "Him or me, because I can't live like this." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll end it," she said. "I'll tell him it's over." I wanted to believe her, but the trust between us was shattered. "Do it now," I said, handing her her phone. She stared at it like it was a bomb about to go off. "Right now?" "Yes. Call him. Tell him it's done." She looked at me, pleading. "Can't we talk about this first? I need time to—" "You've had time," I interrupted. "Months, apparently. If you want any chance of fixing this, you'll do it now." Her hand trembled as she picked up the phone. She dialed the number, put it on speaker, and waited. "Hey, gorgeous," came his voice on the other end. I felt a surge of rage, but I stayed silent, watching her. She took a shaky breath. "Jake, I can't do this anymore. It's over." There was a pause, and then he laughed, low and incredulous. "What are you talking about? Is he there? Put me on with him." "No," she said firmly, her voice steadying. "This was a mistake. I can't see you anymore." "Come on," he said, his tone shifting to irritation. "We've talked about this. You're not happy with him, and you know it." I wanted to grab the phone and tear into him, but I didn't. This wasn't my fight. "Goodbye, Jake," she said and hung up. She looked at me, her face a mix of relief and fear. "There, it's done." But I didn't feel relieved. If anything, I felt emptier than before. Breaking things off with him didn't erase the betrayal, and I wasn't sure it ever could. The silence after she hung up was deafening. She set the phone down on the table as if it might shatter in her hands. Her eyes met mine, wide and tearful, searching for some sign of forgiveness or hope. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice trembling. I leaned back in my chair, staring at her like she was a stranger. I don't know, I admitted. You said it's over, but how do I know that? How do I trust anything you say? She opened her mouth to respond, but closed it again. I could see the gears turning in her head as she tried to find the right words. But there weren't any. Nothing she could say would make this better. I'll do whatever it takes, she said finally. Therapy, full transparency, you can have my passwords, my location, anything. Just don't give up on us. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to believe her. But her promises felt hollow, like the echo of a song I used to love but couldn't listen to anymore. I need space, I said. I can't think straight right now. Space? She repeated, panicked. What does that mean? Are you leaving? No, I said firmly. I'm not leaving the house. But I can't just pretend everything's fine. I need time to figure out if I can even do this. Her shoulders slumped, and she nodded. Okay, whatever you need. That night, I slept in the guest room. The bed felt too big, too cold, but I couldn't bear the thought of lying next to her. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her with him. The way she must have smiled at him, touched him, shared pieces of herself that used to be mine. The next morning, she made coffee and left mine on the counter like she always did. I almost laughed at the normalcy of it. Did she think a cup of coffee would fix this? I ignored it and went for a long walk. The crisp morning air felt like a slap in the face, but it was better than being inside, drowning in my own thoughts. When I got back, she was sitting at the dining table, her laptop open. I scheduled an appointment with a marriage counselor, she said as soon as I walked in. I shrugged. Okay. I also wrote Jake an email, she added, to make sure he knows it's really over. Do you want to read it? No, I said quickly. The last thing I wanted was to see more of her words to him, even if they were goodbye. I'll take your word for it. Her face fell, and I felt a pang of guilt, but I didn't have the energy to comfort her. She'd done this, not me. For the next few days, we lived like polite strangers. We talked only about the necessities, schedules, groceries, bills, and avoided any mention of Jake or the future. But one evening, as I was scrolling through my phone, a notification popped up, a message from an unfamiliar number. You think you've won, but she'll be back. You're not enough for her, and you never will be. It didn't take a genius to figure out who it was from. My heart pounded as I stared at the screen. Was this a bluff? Or was there some truth to it? I showed her the message, my hands shaking. Care to explain this? Her face went pale. Oh my God! I didn't think he'd. I'll handle it, she stammered. No, I said coldly. You've handled enough. I'll take care of it. And for the first time since this all began, I felt a spark of anger. Not just at her, but at him. I stared at the message from Jake, the words searing into my brain. You're not enough for her. That was the part that stuck. It wasn't just a taunt. It was the fear I hadn't been able to shake since this whole nightmare began. But instead of breaking down, I felt something shift inside me. I was done playing the passive victim. If he thought he could worm his way back into my wife's life, he was wrong. Give me his number, I said, my voice low. Her eyes widened. What? Why? Because he messaged me, and now I'm going to deal with him, I said. She hesitated, then unlocked her phone and handed it to me. Don't escalate this, she pleaded. He's not worth it. I didn't respond. I copied the number, walked outside, and dialed. He answered on the second ring. Hello. It's me, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. Ah, the husband. I was wondering when you'd grow a spine. I'm only going to say this once, I said, ignoring the jab. Stay away from her. No messages, no calls, no contact. You're done. He laughed again, a grating sound that made my blood boil. And what if she doesn't want to stay away? She made her choice, I said firmly. And now I'm making mine. If you try to interfere in my marriage again, you'll regret it. Big words, he sneered. But let's be real. You're just the consolation prize. She'll come back to me. They always do. I clenched my teeth, fighting the urge to hurl the phone across the yard. We'll see about that, I said, and hung up. When I walked back inside, my wife was sitting on the couch, twisting her wedding ring around her finger. Did he answer? She asked quietly. Yeah, I said. and he thinks you'll go running back to him. Her eyes filled with tears. I won't. I promise you I won't. I wanted to believe her, but the doubts lingered. This isn't just about him, I said. It's about us. If we're going to get through this, I need you to be all in. No more lies. No more secrets. I am all in, she said, reaching for my hand. I'll do whatever it takes. Her words sounded sincere, but sincerity wasn't enough anymore. I needed actions. That night, I started sleeping in our bedroom again. It felt like a small step toward normalcy, but the space between us was palpable. We lay in silence, both pretending to sleep, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. And then, just when I thought I might drift off, she spoke. I think I need therapy, she said softly. I turned to face her in the dark. What kind of therapy? Individual, she said. To figure out why I did this. Why I sabotaged us. Her admission caught me off guard. You really think it'll help? I don't know, she admitted. But I have to try. I owe it to you. To us. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was something. The next week felt like walking through a minefield. Every conversation with my wife carried an undercurrent of tension. Every glance was laced with questions neither of us dared to ask out loud. But true to her word, she scheduled her first therapy session. When she came home after that session, she looked emotionally drained, her face pale and her eyes red. How was it? I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. Hard, she admitted, setting her bag down. But good. I think it's a start. What did you talk about? I asked cautiously. She hesitated, then said, about us. About why I felt so disconnected, why I let it get this far. The therapist said I've been avoiding my own unhappiness instead of dealing with it, and dragging you down with me. Her words stung, but I nodded. It's good you're figuring that out. But what about fixing this? Fixing us? That's next, she said. She suggested couples therapy, too. If you're willing. I wasn't sure if I was ready, but I agreed. I figured if she was making the effort, I owed it to myself to see if there was anything left to save. Our first session together was brutal. Sitting across from her, with a stranger guiding the conversation, forced us to confront truths we'd been avoiding. I felt invisible, she said at one point, her voice shaking. Like I was just a mom, a wife, a caretaker. Never just me. And Jake, he saw me. That's not an excuse. I snapped, my frustration boiling over. You could have talked to me. You could have told me how you felt instead of running to him. I know, she said, tears streaming down her face. I know I should have, and I hate myself for not doing it. But I'm telling you now, because I don't want to lose you. The therapist intervened, guiding us back to calmer ground, but the damage was already done. After the session, we drove home in silence, the air between us heavy with unresolved tension. That night, as we lay in bed, she reached for my hand. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she said. But I want you to know I'm not giving up. I'll keep fighting for us, even if you can't yet. Her words should have comforted me, but they didn't. All I could think about was how fragile our marriage had become, like a glass ornament balanced on the edge of a shelf. One wrong move, and it would shatter beyond repair. In the days that followed, I tried to focus on the small signs of progress. The honesty in our conversations, her openness about therapy, the way she started leaving her phone out in the open instead of guarding it like a secret. But every time I looked at her, I saw flashes of Jake. The text messages, the hug outside the community center, his smug voice taunting me over the phone. Healing wasn't going to be easy. And deep down, I wasn't sure if I had the strength to see it through. Things were steady but fragile, like walking on thin ice. Therapy sessions were opening doors we had long ignored, but the emotions flooding through them were overwhelming. I felt like I was holding it together with duct tape and sheer willpower. One evening, after a particularly draining session, we sat on the couch in silence, watching a show neither of us cared about. I could see her stealing glances at me, her lips pressed into a tight line. Finally, she spoke. I need to tell you something, she said. My heart sank. What now? It's about Jake, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Are you serious? I snapped, standing up. I thought we were past this. We are, she said quickly. But I didn't tell you everything before. I froze, the weight of her words pressing down on me. "What didn't you tell me?" She looked down, twisting her hands in her lap. "I told you it wasn't physical, that it was just emotional. But that wasn't true. We were intimate. Twice." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt like the air had been knocked out of my lungs. "Twice," I repeated, my voice cold and flat. "Yes," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I was afraid to tell you before, because I didn't want to lose you. But I can't keep lying. If we're going to move forward, you need to know the whole truth." I stood there, my mind racing. The betrayal I thought I'd been dealing with had just doubled, maybe tripled. All the progress we'd made felt like a cruel joke. "You lied to me," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Even after you promised to be honest, you still lied." "I was scared," she said. "I know that's not an excuse, but I was terrified of what it would do to us. Please, I'm trying to make things right. I couldn't keep it from you anymore." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I grabbed my jacket and walked out the door, needing air, needing space, needing something to stop me from breaking completely. I ended up at a bar a few miles away, nursing a whiskey I didn't even want. My thoughts spiraled as I replayed everything she'd said. The image of them together burned in my mind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd never truly know the extent of her betrayal. When I finally came home hours later, she was waiting on the couch, her face etched with worry. "I thought you weren't coming back," she said softly. "I almost didn't," I admitted. Her shoulders sagged, and she looked down at her hands. "I know I don't deserve it, but I'm begging you to give me another chance. Please, I'll do anything." I sat down across from her, the distance between us feeling insurmountable. "I don't know if I can do this," I said honestly. "I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again." "I'll earn it back," she said, her voice firm despite the tears in her eyes. "No matter how long it takes, I'll prove to you that I'm worth it." Her words hung in the air, but I wasn't sure if I believed them anymore. In the weeks that followed her confession, everything felt raw and uncertain. Therapy sessions became more intense, each one peeling back layers of pain and guilt. Some days, it felt like we were making progress. Other days, it felt like we were just digging deeper into a wound that might never heal. I started spending more time away from home, long walks, sitting in coffee shops, even just driving aimlessly. Anything to escape the suffocating atmosphere of our house. But no matter where I went, the questions followed me. Could I forgive her? Did I even want to? One evening, I came home late to find her sitting on the porch, waiting for me. She looked small and vulnerable, like she had shrunk under the weight of everything that had happened. "I need to know where we stand," she said as I approached. I sighed, sitting down next to her. "I wish I knew. I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "And if you want me to leave, I will. I won't fight you on it. But if there's even a small part of you that still believes in us, I want to stay. I want to fight for this." Her words hung in the air, and I realized she was giving me the one thing she hadn't before, a choice. For the first time, I let myself really look at her, not just as the woman who had betrayed me, but as the woman I'd loved for so many years. I saw the pain in her eyes, the regret, the desperate hope that we could somehow rebuild what had been broken. "I don't know if I can ever forget what you did," I said finally. "And I don't know if I'll ever fully trust you again." "I understand," she said. "But trust can be rebuilt. If you're willing to let me try, I'll spend the rest of my life proving to you that I'm worth it." I sat there, weighing her words, my heart and mind at war. I thought about the life we had built together, the memories we shared, the future we had once dreamed of. And I thought about Jake, the lies, the betrayal that had cut me so deeply. Finally, I made my choice. "I'm not ready to give up," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But this is going to take time, and it's going to take work. A lot of work." Her breath hitched, and tears filled her eyes. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said. I nodded, not entirely convinced but willing to try. Because despite everything, a part of me still loved her. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to take the first step. As we sat there in the fading light, I realized that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. It might even lead to more heartbreak. But for now, we had a chance. And sometimes a chance is all you need.